Welcome back to Tide Pod. Brandon, Tony, myself, Jack is my name. Welcome back in. We've got a big show to kind of dive into. We're gonna have Jordan, the famous Jordan Harper, on later, who's been ducking us as of recent to talk about basketball. But we have a ton of football stuff to get into first and foremost, and we'll start right from the top. Tony and Brandon, signing day. We're recording this on Thursday. Signing day was yesterday. Bama bringing in 23 signees. Still have 2 commits who have yet to sign, if my numbers are all correct there. But yeah, you guys were busy on the timelines, on the making graphics, making tweets, posting about all these guys who were brought in. What were your kind of takeaways? Was it a relatively comfortable, drama-free signing day, or were there some kind of wrinkles and things thrown in that maybe Bama fans weren't expecting?
Brendan, I'll let you start since you're a recruiting expert. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, coming into the week, the expectation that it was going to be a very busy week, in particular, like signing day. But I mean, as we've come to learn about Coach Saban, sometimes he doesn't want to wait. And so, for Jaylen Ross to come off the board on Monday, it was like, okay, well, we kind of know there's some fireworks set to happen. And, there's I think the staff, at least there was expectation that, they would potentially get 7 guys, whether that be Edric Houston, Tristan Jernigan's actually still on the board, even though we expect him to stick with his A&M commitment and sign with them. But then, it was Edric Houston, it was Kevin Riley, then also Aaron Hampton, which was kind of like a questionable thing for a lot of people. Then even Steve Mabau. I'm just gonna that's it until he corrects me. And then just like several other guys that they were kind of in the mix for, where it was like trending. Hey, Alabama, if everything falls in place, and some people go a different direction, the one class, maybe if everything falls in place, could have made some sense. For me, like there's a lot of confidence in certain areas, and then there was some uncertainty, other areas as well. Whether that was like a favor Edwin, or seeing if Edric Houston would actually go through with it, even though there was a lot of, that was like almost a lock in many regards, until it wasn't, right. But for me, it was a crazy day from start to finish because Bama did like something very unique where it's like, okay, you're up at 5:30, you're kind of like waiting, getting prepared. And then I'm like, okay, where's the first signing? Like I was like, yeah, people on campus, like I was, like an hour went by, and then, Justin gets on board, and then 20 minutes later, there's like another signing. And then it was like, okay, you can tell Alabama's like cranking out, the guys who they have on campus. And then the drama kind of started as far as, who they were going to flip, who they would land, whether that was a Jaden Ball. And, for me, the night before and even the morning of, it was working the phones, talking to multiple different staffs, not just Alabama's, and multiple different sources to try to figure out, what exactly would happen. Overall, I feel like, it was a good close by Alabama. I think they actually had one of the best closes in the country, as far in terms of who they brought in terms of the types of players they landed, in terms of the flips, in terms of filling positions of need. Offensive line is still an area that, we could see, we'd like to see more, but, from my perspective, to get pretty much every spot filled was major. And crazy enough, there's still a 1 or 2 guys lingering even in just the 2024 class that we may hear more about when we approach January.
Yeah, one of the people you talked about was Aaron Hampton. That's a guy that Nick Saban was talking about or asked about after during his press conference on early signing day. And Aaron goes by Bubba, by the way. And if that's not an NIL partnership with Bubba Gump Shrimp, then like I don't even want it. Like then NIL is just doing it wrong because you've got the Gump Bubba. It's just too good of a thing. But he called Aaron Hampton a dog. He's a guy that, at Deerfield High School in Texas, never came off the field, really. He was a great cornerback and a great wide receiver and somebody that, like, could have been a blue chip prospect on either side of the ball. And I think that's one of, my favorite signings. And just to flip him from Texas, Brandon, I mean, we both come from Texas. We know how hard that is to do. I thought that was a big get for Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking to him a little bit more, he had probably one of the most unique recruiting process that you could have even followed. For first, starting out with his commitment to Baylor, and then he turns around and commits to Texas, and then I show up to Jaylen Hill signing last year, and he's actually wearing Alabama gear, but he says don't report it, and then kind of like this, the pot starts to stir as far as kind of him leaning towards Bama. And then he tells me, hey, I'm going to go to Bama like early January of, I guess, 2024. And so I'm kind of ready for that because he's decommitted and then, kind of strung things out and then decides to commit to Texas again. But, just knowing kind of people in the area, knowing what, East Texas has done for Alabama over the years, his relationship with Jaylen Hill, and just kind of knowing what type of kid he is and how he likes to stir the pot, everything for me kind of lined up that, Alabama was home. Texas transparently was talking to him about potentially playing defense because he is an athlete and he plays both sides of the ball. Whenever I saw him in the playoff game last year, not this past season, but the prior two, he made plays on both sides of the ball. He had a big catch, multiple big plays in that game offensively, and then defensively he had interception as well. So you can see why, both teams coveted him at multiple, on both sides of the ball. But, his love was offense. He had a great relationship with Wiggins, talked heavily about him, even when he had committed to Texas for the second time. And, even, the staff was still confident, and I had some confidence as well that Aaron Hampton's going to make his way back around because he wanted to be at Alabama. The cards just had to lay themselves out. And, luckily, everything kind of fell in place where now we get to see East Texas spreads wings even more and, get to kind of see the combination of Jaylen Hill and Aaron Bubba Hampton.
Yeah, the Bubba nickname rocks. I think you gotta be good with a nickname like Bubba. Tony mentioned Hampton. Brandon, you've watched so many of these guys, and now that some of them are officially official to Alabama, who are a couple names either, from what you've heard, maybe the Crimson Tide are, so obviously they're going to be excited about everyone they sign, certainly. But, who are some guys you think, on your radar that maybe could have a big impact right away or even long-term, guys that you're thinking are going to make a huge impact on this Crimson Tide team in the years to come?
I guess we can kind of just work down the totem pole. So, obviously Sayin's just a big deal just to have him in the boat. I think you have to start with him until Ryan Williams was on board. He was kind of like the only 5-star that we had. So I'm not going to disrespect Julian. Like, it was a big deal to get him, and it's still a big deal to have him, right? And, according to Tony, he's been turning some heads, or I guess according to Milrow, but you get my point. But yeah, that's a major get. You want a guy like that in your room. And every time I talk to Julian, me and Julian actually have a good relationship. When I get with him, he get back, but he's definitely a pro. His answers are short to the point. He knows what he's trying to do. But I think he'll bring that professionalism to the table on a daily basis. And, when I got to see him, it was like, okay, he's definitely legit. Every throw was sharp, crisp, poised. They were down at one point in the game and just never bad the eye. he could make all the throws. So, you can't overlook him. Second, Kevin Riley, I think that was a major flip. Something that was kind of trending for a while. He had visited for the LSU game, kind of in secrecy, kid that wanted to keep to himself. But I think he could really benefit from just the structure of the Alabama program and not having to rush to get on the field. A guy who, when he puts on another 5-10, quality pounds of muscle, because he's on the thinner side right now, just kind of based on his situation. But he'll be able to really develop into a dynamic running back that will fit nicely into a room that has a strong batch of talent. That two guys that we're kind of waiting to see pop off. Whether that's a Justice or even a Richard. Who Richard didn't even play last year. And he was one of the top names in the country whenever he came in. And then you look at the receiving core. Amari Jefferson, every single time I saw him, he put on a show. State championship game, he had over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, one that he took, 50 plus yards, and one of his catches to start the game, he cut over basically like 2 defenders. So, just a tough, smart kid that is a dual sport athlete. And, guys who are dual sport athletes usually do well. And then, you have Rico Scott, who, I think is going to be more solid than what people think. He kind of reminds me of like a John Mechie, to be honest. Like, kind of from the same area, kind of same vibe. Like, just guy who's going to put his head down and work. One name that I think definitely playing time, Caleb Odom. Just the mismatch, the ability. He has fairly good size. I think, just ultimately he has some speed, great hands, put up good numbers, is used to playing with kind of a college-ready quarterback, in Julian Lewis. And so I think Caleb Odom can definitely make a tremendous impact. I think Casey Poe's a guy that, probably has the first look at playing time, just based on his demeanor, the type of work he's going to bring on a day-to-day basis. For him, I was looking at a picture of him the other day before even really Bama got involved. And I was like thinking back to it, I was like, I knew that you were going to Bama the first time we talked, but I just wanted to let him do his process instead of, potentially ruining it and letting, everybody start to speculate, but just to see him grow up and develop and become the man he's become and to carry Lindell the way he did, I think he's going to definitely bring some high expectations to Tuscaloosa, and even like a Will Sanders, who in many regards, I would love to fight for him to have 4 stars because, I think Will Sanders is gonna turn some heads, like just based on who he trains with, winning edge in Alabama and in Birmingham, and who he's been able to produce over the years. I really am a big fan of Will Sanders, and so that's kind of like the offense right now. And Tony, if you want to comment, go for it, and then we can talk defense.
Yeah, look, I think with Poe and Sanders, one of the things that I think they're good prospects, and maybe like you said, even underrated prospects. But one of the things that Nick Saban said after early signing day or during his early signing day, press conference was that they're still in the market for offensive linemen. I don't think either of those guys are plug and play guys the way that Caden Proctor was, or some of the other instant playing time kind of guys are. And if you look at, Alabama's going to need to replace some offensive linemen. They could possibly have to replace Seth McLaughlin at center. They're definitely going to have to replace J.C. Latham at right tackle. One of the people you would have thought that would have replaced J.C. Latham, Elijah Pritchett, he's run into all sorts of drama. He, declared his intention to enter the transfer portal, then changed his mind. Then, we're recording this on a Thursday, but Wednesday night he gets arrested. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with him. I mean, I think he still has a future with Alabama. I don't think that, he's going to get kicked off the team or anything like that. We'll have to see what happens, but it's just, it's not trending in the right direction for him. And he's a guy that you were already thin at offensive line. And now I think that it's going to be even more interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama goes to the portal and kind of goes for another offensive lineman, just because they're going to need A, depth probably, and then B, experience depth. You can't just plug in one of these guys as a freshman. Look how talented Caden Proctor was, and then also look how much he struggled in year one. So it's really hard to go just plug and play at the offensive line position. Alabama's got some guys that might be ready to step up. Maybe Miles McVay. Obviously Terrence Ferguson's a guy that's been a really good kind of 6th offensive lineman for them. But even with those 2 guys, you're really going to need to add some experience depth. So that's one thing to watch moving forward, on this team. Yes, they're happy with the offensive lineman they brought in, but it's definitely not done.
Yeah, definitely. And then, that'll be a storyline to maybe keep an eye on, whether it's in the transfer portal. Defensive side of the ball. I mean, you had a guy in Caleb Downs as a true freshman excel. We know, especially in the secondary, this team's going to have a lot of holes. Who do y'all like from this class? I know, Saban was asked about Drake Kirkpatrick Jr. I know he's lower down on the stars ranking or whatever you want to put that as. Obviously, a legacy player is going to turn some heads, just a recognizable name. But Brandon, who are some guys to watch on that side of the ball?
Yeah, there's quite a few actually, because defense seemed like it was going to go crazy the other day, and heck, I still look at that 2023 class and go, you didn't see most of those guys play, so I think that batch is brewing. I feel like that in many regards that kind of probably pushed Alabama to where they are now, to not see those guys play, and they're waiting for their opportunity. But Jayshon Ross, I'm told the staff is extremely high on him. Like, plays with an attitude, has a demeanor, fits kind of exactly what they want. So Jayshon Ross is definitely a name that stands out. I can't overlook in-state prospect Jeremiah Beeman, who kind of helped set the tone for this class as far as the defensive line was concerned. His decision to stay at home, despite, getting some serious interest from Auburn, who, definitely wanted to try to push Alabama this recruiting cycle. But, of course, still fell short because, Nick Saban's going to do what he does. And then Steve Mabau, he actually reclassified. But if you see the kid in person, I mean, he's well put together. He trains with Madhouse. Madhouse, had Quay Rusaw, James Smith. They know how to develop some talent. And, a guy like that, doesn't, go off of just a whim, to decide to reclassify. Obviously the staff saw some things in him that, was definitely warranted. I mean, even like a Caden Jones, to me, he's just like such a project. It's like, what are you going to get with him? And I think, just getting around the high quality athletes, that Alabama has, I think maybe that will just ignite in him kind of a competitive juice. I know truly the entire cycle, he was upset about his rivals ranking. Him and his mom were upset. And I know for a fact, so if he takes any of that to the football field in Tuscaloosa, I think, he'll definitely at least, put himself in position to compete. Another name, as far as linebackers is concerned, Sterling Dixon. That kid is tough. Straight, played injured for really the second half of the season. And whenever he had his in-home with Coach Saban, he was in a sling, but he played the last game without a sling and still, accounted for over 120 tackles, really 128 on the year. And he actually moved up from Mobile Christian to Spanish Fort. So a greater degree of football, something where, he wanted to display his toughness. So Sterling Dixon is definitely a name that I just keep an eye on just because he fits that Alabama demeanor. And it's just going to be hard for me to not eventually see Sterling Dixon make some plays out there for Alabama just because how he's built. He was one of the longest tenured recruits in the recruiting cycle. Really high on Sterling, more than probably what he thinks, to be honest. And then, defensively, as far as the defensive backs are concerned, there's, I think overall the staff wanted to make sure that there was depth. And I think across the board, this 2024 class, I mean, we look at 25, and those are guys who are coming in to take jobs straight up. They are coming, the class as a whole is very, very strong. And 24 was a lot more of those guys will have the opportunity to redshirt, wait, be depth. And I think that's what the staff wanted, is guys who were willing to buy in to the system and not want to jump to the portal after not playing for a year. And so, you have Jaylen Mbakwe, who, in my personal opinion, should definitely have opportunity to be Mr. Football for Alabama for what he did for Clay Chalkville, stepping up, winning a state championship. Didn't even get to play his position all year, and still carried them to state and beat out Ryan Williams, say that. But him getting to play defensive back and being trained by Coach L, who had Kool-Aid, he has that pedigree, and, just Jalen's just a winner, that's just one thing I like about that kid. He's just a winner, and he works. And I think, being able to carry that to Tuscaloosa is going to be huge because he definitely helped cultivate this class. And then also Jameer Grimsley, legit 6'3". The weight thing is something that I would like to see. He's obviously going to want to put on some weight, but he's funny. He's from Florida as well. Tyrion Arnold was from Florida. They have kind of similar frames. They kind of have both versatility. Tyrion Arnold, was listen, there's a safety coming out, and then this kid played the same build, just one's light skin, one's dark skin. Yeah, but Jameer Grimsley is definitely one, especially a player that they had to kind of fend off Florida for because Florida was kind of his dream school. But he said, I can't turn down the opportunity to play for Bama. And, when you take that into account, it's well, if Florida wanted him that bad and Nick Saban wanted to make sure he was in the class despite having 5 other defensive backs, they must know something that they know, So, overall, I think it was a good, haul defensively, and a lot of guys will be able to contribute long term.
Yeah, you mentioned some of those defensive backs having to wait a year. I mean, shoot. They might have to step up a little bit. Alabama's going to lose so much in the secondary that, a guy like Jaylen Mbakwe, you mentioned he could be, able to play year one. He might have to. I mean, they're going to lose both their cornerbacks. Every mock draft we've seen has had Kool-Aid and Tyrion Arnold going in the first round. Jalen Key is going to be out of eligibility. So right there, that's 3 that you have to replace. You don't know what you're going to get with Malachi Moore. Does he come back? Does he leave? If he leaves, that's 4 of your 5 starting secondary guys. That's intimidating. They can still add some guys from the transfer portal. Damani Jackson, that we talked about from USC, before the show, is a guy that they really recruited heavily. In last year's recruiting process. Was it last year, Brandon?
I believe it was 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah. But he's a guy that they really recruited heavily. Could come in and play that cornerback position, a 5-star kid. But I think a guy like Jaylen Mbakwe, I think for me is one of the more important players in this class. Just because what he might have to step up and do, which is going to be tough, coming in, learning Nick Saban's secondary, hammering it down. That's not easy work. But I think he's a guy that I would circle. We're going to come out with some players to watch for instant impact, but just spoiler alert, he'll be on it for me, just for what he can do and the talent. And so, talk about a position of need and a talented player at that guy. He's a guy that, we've talked about rankings. Brandon, I don't know what you think. He's a guy that might, be able to float around that 5-star range. Rivals has him as a 4-star. I think I wouldn't mind him being a 5-star. I think he's
Brandon's
a really
got
good 5.
Yeah. Brandon's putting up a 5 for those not watching on the YouTube. He's got a 5.
Yeah. Maybe we need to talk to some of those guys at Rivals.
But we have to. But he'll get a 5.
We don't make the final say on these. It's not like me and Brandon are sitting here, formulating. I don't have a say in this. So I think Jaylen Mbakwe, he's a 5-star in my book.
They need to do, you like you mentioned that with Jones, like they need to do like a re-rank at the end of every season, re-star everybody so that you can be like, this is where, like when everyone does a redraft, 5 years down the line.
Well, we have one more coming up.
They do. They have one more.
Oh, they have one more. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
The argument that we have for Mbakwe,
he deserves it.
Athlete. Yeah. Mbakwe can get it as an athlete. I don't know if they'll give it to him as a DB. And that's what I've been trying to get him as an athlete because he played quarterback all year. 2 names that we can't. I have to put in there. We talked about California. Peyton Woodyard, I think he has a legitimate shot to see the field pretty quickly. He kind of same demeanor as Caleb Downs. High on Woodyard, just frame, comes from a strong program. We already kind of talking about another California transfer as far as like being from California. And then his best friend who kind of helped start the party to flip him in the first place, and Zabian Brown. And that kid's demeanor, he may surprise some people. People can say what they want about California defensive backs, but he missed a couple games. But whenever he actually was in and he came back, I mean, he was a difference maker in them getting Bosco in the second go around. He was making plays like on a weekly basis, interceptions. Zabian Brown is truly, he's one of my favorite players in the class. And you're not supposed to have favorites, but keeps to himself. When he came on campus, he said, really the main kind of factor for him to kind of choose Alabama, amongst others, was Caleb Downs. He was just so impressed with how Caleb carried himself, how he took advantage of the opportunity, and he has that exact same demeanor. So I feel like Xavier Brown is definitely a name that you have to look out for, and he's a top 250 player. He jumped multiple spots in the latest ranking. High on Xavier Brown.
Bama fans aren't going to be upset at another Caleb Downs. So
didn't call him Caleb Downs.
Like what we said earlier.
He liked him.
Yeah. Don't mind a guy emulating what Caleb Downs did in his freshman campaign for sure. Just obviously a wild day, a busy day for you guys. Any just quick final storylines? So now heading into January, cools off a little bit, and then obviously it'll heat right back up with recruiting, and then obviously the transfer portal as well. But on the recruiting trail, Brandon, Tony, any other just quick storylines from here now, knowing who Alabama signed, knowing who they're still looking to sign, what should fans be paying attention to?
One name that's still kind of floating around and was expected to sign this week, Xavier Mincy. Had the opportunity to go and kind of see him in person. While I was there, Florida was there, like vultures. And it was kind of a question of what he would do, but there's some uncertainty as to, really where his head's at. it's crazy to think that Alabama is looking to add another defensive back. But, hey, if you can add them and take them, you add them and you take them. And, one thing that really impressed me when I got to see him was his length, his physicality, his toughness. So, Florida's been good to Alabama over the years, kind of in any regard, receiver, DB, you name it. Definitely a name to watch for, to potentially add. And then because they have one running back and there still could be an opportunity for two, you can't overlook Daniel Hill, who's actually expected to sign this week. I'm not like as confident as I was before because he kind of seems like he wants to do his own thing instead of buying into the process. He wants to be the guy instead of one of the guys. Mm-hmm. But, he's definitely another one, for the All-American game in San Antonio that, will announce. So at least worth a watch.
Yeah. Tony, any other narratives from you?
Look, I don't even want to throw a rumor out there that's not going to happen, but like part of me wonders, like, can Alabama and I don't see this happening, but we're recording this on a Thursday. Can Alabama make a run at Jordan Seaton, the offensive tackle? Can they come in here with some NIL money and just say, look, man, Caden Proctor did it last year. We might have an opening at right tackle. Yeah, I know he committed to Dion in Colorado, but he hasn't signed, at least not yet. Alabama really hasn't been mentioned here, but could this be like the ultimate heist kind of like last minute thing? I don't know, Brandon. I don't think it would happen, but it's worth kind of like, if we're around Christmas time.
Speculating, yeah.
We're around Christmas time, and maybe for Alabama to have a little Christmas miracle on the offensive line, boy, would that be like just an absolutely Hollywood addition, getting the top tackle, being able to kind of replenish that offensive line, especially with all the indecision or uncertainty, I guess, around Elijah Pritchett. I mean, I think that, if Jordan Seaton was to commit to Alabama, now, once again, we're almost speaking this into existence here, but I think he would have an opportunity to play. I really do think he would have an opportunity to play right away. And then he'd be able to look at a guy like Caden Proctor, who, yes, he did struggle, but was the highest graded player in the SEC championship game and now seems to be a strength and will be one of Alabama's most important players next season, getting to do that, being a freshman All-American kind of guy. Look, I think that it's interesting. It's definitely something to look at. Now, whether or not it formulates, I'm just saying, like, if we're just throwing out, potential things, I don't see why Alabama wouldn't get interested in a kid like that.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up on your point, many would say that Alabama finished second. I mean, in multiple regards, Alabama was the leader until like the whole Colorado thing happened. It just was kind of out of nowhere, as most would say. And the expectation was he was going to be the top offensive lineman they would take. He was kind of the main offensive line target. Things kind of seemed to line up. He was taking some silent visits to Alabama multiple times. The staff felt really confident about it. There's a lot of positives around it. And, there was kind of like that greater opportunity to play more immediately, especially whenever he's comparing himself to Trent Williams right now. So, if he's going to be that, I'm sure Coach Saban and company would definitely take a kid who is quote unquote Trent Williams-esque, in the class. So, I'll say this, if he waits until February, things get interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, so we'll stand by what happens with that. Let's segue. Obviously, recruiting never really stops, but a big signing day for the Crimson Tide. But let's segue. Talk about another addition, another new guy coming in next year, in on the transfer portal. A former 5-star recruit in that touted Texas A&M class from a couple years ago, LT Overton, the Texas A&M former 5-star transferring to Alabama, 48 tackles in 2 seasons with the Aggies. Big addition, fellas, for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, a guy that really is better than his numbers at Texas A&M. He's playing behind a really strong Texas A&M front seven. I mean, there was just a lot of talent there, so he didn't get on the field as much. But I think he's definitely somebody that can be an instant impact player for Alabama. The thing with LT Overton that you got to watch is just where is he going to end up weight-wise? He was 280 pounds coming out of high school, more of that true pass rushing D end. Then A&M runs a different scheme than Alabama. Needed him to lose about 15 pounds, so he drops to 265. At Alabama, he's a little bit of a tweener right now. You're not going to have him drop an extra 15 pounds to play what, Dallas Turner or Chris Braswell plays at. So you're really going to have him bump up. You look at like a Jamarian Latham weighs 275. Ideally you could get him up to the 280, maybe even 290 where Justin Mbakwe is. Basically, he's got to be big enough that when Alabama wants to use its Jack and Sam linebackers as pseudo defensive ends, like it does in a lot of passing sets, it needs to have a defensive lineman that they can move inside for almost like a pass rushing tackle. And right now at 265 pounds, that's not something LT Overton can do. Now, I fully expect him to put on weight at Alabama, but that's going to be a big, when you're projecting him, that's one of the things that you have to look at is how much weight can he put on? Can he really, if he's going to make his biggest amount of impact, he's going to have to put on enough weight where he can do that. And he can kind of play that defensive tackle position, something that I think I looked on Pro Football Focus. He might have had like 4 or 3 snaps at defensive tackle this season. So it's not something he's played. Obviously, why would he at 265? But that's the big thing you look at LT Overton. And so, yes, big addition for Alabama in terms of they needed that edge rusher. They're going to lose a Justin Mbakwe. They're going to lose a Tim Smith. So they need that kind of guy. But they're also losing a Dallas Turner. And they're also losing a Chris Braswell, and they need a Jack or a Sam linebacker to come in as well. I know they have Yanzi Pierre and Keon Keeley and even Q Robinson, coming back. But Keeley and Pierre didn't play it down this year as true freshmen. And Robinson, while he's an experienced player, is going to be coming back for his final season. He's a guy that doesn't have any starting experience. So getting a guy with like LT Overton that has plenty of SEC experience, he even has a few SEC starts under his belt. I think that is, that's important at the very least for depth, but I expect him to be, once he gains weight, to be a big, important role in this, in the rotation for sure.
Definitely. Brandon, you have any takes on LT Overton or even some other guys for both of y'all like that Alabama might be looking to target in the portal?
Yeah, I mean, I just definitely thought it was an interesting addition. A guy who reclassified up. It's crazy. He reclassified up and now he's in the portal. He was the number 1 player in the country for his class. But I think that's why Bama took him, right? At the end of the day, he's a younger guy with still upside, and maybe just the A&M experience wasn't good for him. I mean, that year they took like 8 defensive linemen, slash, outside linebacker slash, edge rusher. So somebody didn't have to pan out and being the younger guy in their group. Maybe it was just, the Jimbo Fisher effect, which obviously meant 5 and 7. But, I like LT still. And I think, just sometimes it's about coaching and atmosphere. And, obviously with atmosphere, it's 5 and 7. Next year, your coach is fired, sometimes, and then everybody's kind of bolting out. That can play a big factor. So for me, I'm just excited to see him. And he's a name. He's once again a name that, Bama has names every year. They have the best names every year. That's what makes it Bama. And so, I think in the aspect of, hey, he's had some dirt thrown on his name. If people are kind of questioning him, doubting him, usually Nick Saban knows how to get a hold of the guys' hearts who've been questioned. He knows how to take, the rat poison and put it all in your ear, your face, make you sniff it, smell it, touch it, taste it, to get to your best ability. And so I think this environment will push him to be the best player he can be. And I'm excited for him to be on the board.
It's a good anecdote, Brandon, with the rat poison.
Yeah,
I enjoyed that. It was well said. No.
You mentioned other names too, Brandon. One guy we've been talking about is Trey Moore from UTSA. A guy that Alabama visited and a guy that visited Alabama last weekend. He's more of that edge rusher that Dallas Turner is, that Chris Braswell is. I think he's 3rd in the nation with 14 sacks. Now, he's doing it, at the AAC. He's not doing that in the SEC. But I think, back-to-back seasons, a productive player. He was the AAC player of the year, defensive player of the year this year. He's definitely got the production that you think at least some of it would translate to the SEC, and he'd be an interesting guy. So keep an eye out for that. If you could add him and Overton, you're really helping out that edge position. And then you can kind of rely on, your Jordan Renaud to kind of step up and kind of work with, Overton, and you're kind of, then you can rely on your Keon Keeley or Yanzi Pierre to kind of step up and work with Trey Moore and Quindarius Robinson. I think that starts when you have those veteran guys that you can kind of plug in. You're not solely relying on the young talent, and that way you can allow the young talent to kind of integrate with the system and flourish, kind of break in a lot better than just throwing them out into the fire. Right now, I mean, shoot, you'd probably have Quindarius Robinson and Keon Keeley, and you're just throwing Keon Keeley from not playing a down of college football to like, all right, kid, go get him. So maybe it'd be Keon Coate. I don't want to totally just knock out Keon Coate, but you're still you're throwing guys that just don't play a lot and just being like, all right, go for it. So I still think that there's work to be done in that edge rusher position. Other spots too, kind of segueing to other spots. We mentioned offensive line. I don't think there's an offensive lineman in the portal that's like super stands out that like Alabama is definitely going for, so that's kind of a wait and see. When one comes in, I think Alabama might pursue it, or shoot, like we talked about with Jordan Seaton, maybe they get a guy like that. I still think Alabama would rather at least get one experienced offensive lineman in there, whether it's even an interior guy or, whatever they want to do. That would be something interesting to do. I think that, the cornerback position, we talked about Damani Jackson, getting somebody that's going to come in. So you don't they're going to have to fill bodies at cornerback, and at safety and at star maybe. So, any kind of defensive back help. Jackson's a guy that they've pursued. It's a name that makes sense. He's super talented, obviously had some interest in Alabama. So that's a name to watch moving forward, but there'll be others too. It's kind of tough for Alabama. You can pursue guys in the portal a little bit, and then at the same time, you're still focused on winning a national championship game. So you can't totally sell out maybe like an Ole Miss can, where, you just put all your focus right now into recruiting. Alabama, has, fingers in two pies, really.
Okay. Yeah. Lots of targets to look for, in the transfer portal. Brandon doing all the work, running down the recruits, and keeping everyone updated. So yeah, it's busy season still, obviously. We've got the bowl game coming up too, and we'll have all the coverage on that. But Saban getting a chance to do some recruiting, and I think wrapped up pretty nicely for the Crimson Tide. Final thoughts from you boys before we segue and talk some basketball.
Yeah, I think Alabama football is it's exciting times. I think that it's a pretty. I thought it was a pretty solid recruiting class. There wasn't maybe it's not historically great like it's been in recent years, but I think they filled a lot of needs. And you got a potential one of the better quarterbacks that you've ever pulled out of high school in Julian Sayin. So that's somebody to watch as well. So I think it's pretty pleasing. And I think we're going to start to see a little bit more noise out of the transfer portal as well. So I think there's good times ahead for Alabama, obviously. And then we've got the playoff, we'll talk about that at a future date. But yeah, I think it's exciting times.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like Tony said, there's a while there whenever the class was at 11 and they sat at 9 for a long time. Like, you didn't even think they looked like a top 5 class, and you're trying to figure out where that was going to come from. But, of course, like Coach Saban and company, made a hard push, and I think they closed with, some of the top prospects late, as far as most top prospects late. And now they're sitting at number 3. And, from where this class was for the majority of the recruiting cycle to where they are today, and still to be involved with some people, is definitely exciting. We can't take for granted what they did last year. So, we kind of get spoiled with it. But, to know what's already on campus and to have these guys coming in, to compete, it's definitely exciting times. And then, as we kind of transition to 25, news is breaking while we're on the podcast, right? And, top 10 player overall in the country, DJ Pickett, safety, actually visited with Bryce Underwood this past weekend, actually just dropped his top 5. List includes Alabama. From, reports, he was definitely impressed with the visit. But, I think, if Alabama fans enjoyed any of the drama that, 24 had to offer, just if you go look at the kids in 25, it's a special group. I mean, Ryan Williams went from, reclassing from 25 to 24 and was still a 5-star. So if that just kind of gives you perspective on what the 25 class looks like and the quality of those kids, I think it's just overall a strong group.
Yeah, so plenty to look forward to already with 25, even with these guys joining a good group from the class a year before. All right, Tony, Brandon, thank you. We'll segue. We're going to finish. We'll talk Alabama basketball, the not so good at the moment for the Crimson Tide. We'll have Jordan hop on to do that to finish off the show. Okay, we're going to finish up with some Alabama basketball. We got Jordan back. Finally, Jordan's back, able to come back on and chop it up about, what's been a tough, shall we say, stretch for the Crimson Tide. 3 losses to 3 straight top 10 teams, all of whom were coming off losses themselves. Of course, most recently, we had the late o'clock tip-off. I think officially it was like 10-12 Tuscaloosa time, Central time, for Alabama against Arizona. The Crimson Tide losing 87-74 in that one. And I mean, Jordan, there's been already so much discourse about, what we're to make of this team now. They lost 3 straight. They're obviously 6-5 at this point. We're unable to make enough, as Nate Oates put it a couple times, winning plays to get things done in this game. Where do you stand? Let's just start with that, with how much people should be hitting the panic button. Should people be worried about, what this team can do down the stretch in SEC play, and of course where it'll end up in March?
Yeah, if you get on Twitter, you'll see, you think the sky was falling for a majority of them. Just because, years past, last year, the year before that, when they made that incredible run, beating Gonzaga, Houston, and Baylor in that non-con, you're accustomed to Nate Oates' teams beating some of these top teams because his schedule is really tough for a big reason, because when it comes March, your metrics are going to show that you played a tough schedule. So I think people are kind of panicked because they don't have that signature win. And there's really no other chances. Liberty could end up being a quadrant 1 win based on the net, because they are 43rd on a neutral site. And Indiana State's 19th in the net right now. So they're predicted to run the table in their conference. So if they do that, that very well could be a quadrant 1 win, even at home. But, people are going to look at the names and not think that. But I'm not panicking. I kind of figured we would lose all 3. I just said if Alabama could win 1, they would be fine. That's like, floor is, if they win 1, anything that else happens, like whatever. If they lose all 3, it's kind of expected. I mean, they were 6 or 7 point underdogs in each of the 3 games that they played or more. So it was kind of expected, but I thought they played really well. I thought they played to the caliber of their competition. And based on what you've seen this year, they have against those 3, Clemson, who has turned out to be a really good team so far, and Ohio State as well, played all 5 teams. They had, close to a double-digit lead in the second half against all 5. But like you said, Nate Oates said it best. They're just not making winning plays when they need to. There was a stretch there against Arizona when they were up 7, I think, with about 12 or 13 minutes left in the game, and they didn't grab a rebound. Grant Nelson didn't grab a rebound. That game went straight to the Arizona players, shot it over to an open shooter, and they made a 3. Alabama misses, come down, make a shot, and 1. And next thing you know, it's a 1 or 2 point game. A chance to go stretch the lead, and they just couldn't do it because they couldn't grab a rebound. Same thing happened when Muhammad Wageed tried to bounce it off of a dude going out of bounds. They get it, and they hit a 3 there as well. So just big swings. You got to make those plays if you're going to beat these top teams. But overall, they're about where I thought they would be. I thought they would beat Clemson and Ohio State. Those ended up being really bad matchups for Alabama, mainly like guys like P.J. Hall for Clemson just dominated our front court. And you see the 3 bigs that Alabama went up against the past 3 games, Kalkbrenner, Edey, and then Ballo last night. I mean, they just manhandled Pringle and McGee until they foul out. So, I'm not panicking. I really think that Alabama will go into conference play 8-5. They're still top 10 in net. They're still top 10 in KenPom. They have a top 5 strength of schedule. All that's going to play a big factor for them come March with seeding. And I've said that I think the floor for them, SEC-wise, is probably 8 wins. I think that's the worst they'll do. But if they get to 10 or more, they'll be a solidified 6, 7 seed come tournament time. And anything more can only boost them. So I'm not panicking. I think the defense is coming along. They're playing hard. Offense has hit a very cold spell, but they've been traveling all over the country for the past week and a half. So I'm sure they're dead tired. And I know people don't want to hear that as an excuse, but I mean, jet lag and all of that and not having time to really recuperate does make a difference, especially with guys like Grant Nelson that's nursing an injury.
Yeah, I think fatigue 1,000% came into play late in that Arizona game. Like as much as you don't want to say that as an excuse, you're right. And yeah, I think I agree with you. I don't think it's time to hit the panic button. It's so easy to scrutinize one loss, and when you string 3 of them together and you're not able to pick up a win, I think it's easy for fans to feel like the sky is falling. But this is what Nate Oates does. Alabama's not going to shy away from its style. And yeah, I think he got to me exactly what he wanted out of this, which is, he said it himself, they learned a lot about themselves. They learned where their vulnerabilities are. And it was frustrating, I'm sure, for fans to see those continually get exposed. You mentioned the front court defense, just getting rocked by 3 very good bigs in back-to-back games. But, you have the issues with getting to the foul line, some of the defensive problems. And, of course, in the last 2 games, they couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with their shot from beyond the arc. So, with the Nate Oates team, that'll start to fix itself. But, certainly, and I hate to put, it doesn't go all on one person, but it was definitely a tough scrutiny outing for Grant Nelson with the way he was shooting the basketball. But that's not, he was being a Nate Oates player. He's not going to stop shooting those. Nate Oates doesn't want him to stop shooting those. But yeah, just diving in a little bit to the Arizona game. Just some of your general takeaways from that. Did you see kind of the same stuff that I did in terms of what went wrong, and even some of the stuff that went well for this team at times in these last 3 games?
I was very impressed early on, as I'm sure most everybody else was, with the defense. They were turning Arizona over. I think that Alabama's style of play, which is very similar to what Arizona's style of play is. I thought Seth Greenberg said it best on the halftime show. Alabama pushed the pace and made Arizona speed it up with them, and they're really not that comfortable going that fast. And they were turning the ball over, taking rush shots, feeling like they had to. And Alabama was really controlling the pace, even though they weren't making threes. And that's pretty much all they shot early, but they were turning it over, they had plenty of open looks if they would just knock those down. It's not like they were taking tough fadeaway step backs or hand in your face threes. They were open. And if it's an open shot, take it. They just couldn't hit. Overall, I think you can point fingers at Grant Nelson a lot, but he was the only guy playing with any sort of confidence. It seemed like everybody wanted the ball out of their hands. Mark Sears, of all people on the team, I thought was very passive, had open shots that he just passed up and tried to make the extra pass and end up getting a few turnovers off of that. Guys just passing up open. The only guys that were playing with confidence was Grant and Sam Walters. I thought Sam Walters had a really good shooting game. He defended okay. But like everybody else on the team, of the 18 turnovers, Arizona's pressure just got to them in the second half. You could tell who was a freshman and who hadn't played high major ball in that second half. You saw even Aaron Estrada turn the ball over several times. Latrell Wrightsell, Jaron Stevenson had a very rough game. And these guys are just young, or they just don't have the experience playing teams like this. But it's easy to point fingers at Grant Nelson, but he kept shooting, and he's really what kept Alabama in the game in the second half. He got hot, hit 3 threes, but I thought he played pretty well defensively. He's still battling an injury. I just feel like they could play him more at the 5 in some ways and just put him in the paint and just go the foul line. He's a 92% foul shooter this year. If the three's not falling, you're going to have to go inside and try something else. So that's really the only complaint I had with him. But I think the game was really lost in two areas. They were outscored 22-4 in fast break points. That shows that of the 18, they got outscored 26-7 off points off turnovers. So you combine those right there, that's showing that Alabama's turning the ball over where Arizona can get out and run. So it's just those open court turnovers that just led to Jaden Bradley driving in and getting layups or getting, uncalled for fouls that shouldn't have happened. I feel like there was probably 6 or 7 fouls Alabama committed on those type of plays where you're just trying to prevent a dunk or a layup on the other end. And with Alabama's foul troubles, you just can't have that happen. But I saw a lot of positives. Defense is still playing hard. Offense is still getting great looks. And, hey, Arizona is a great defensive team, and they still, put up 74 points on them while shooting 8 for 40 from 3. So, you just make, 4 or 5 of those extra. I mean, like they did against Purdue, Alabama probably wins that game. It's just a matter of making winning plays and making shots when you have open shots. Arizona didn't miss too many open shots they got. They did force a lot, but when they got the open shots, they made them. But overall, I was pleased with the performance. Obviously, the last 10 minutes was kind of infuriating for Alabama fans, seeing the turnovers, can't get the ball in bounds. It was just they were panicking, and you could tell. But overall, defense is playing well. Offense is still going to put up a lot of points. It's just keeping the front court out of foul trouble and then just keep running your offense. Those shots will fall. They play Eastern Kentucky this upcoming week. So it's going to be, or this upcoming game, it's just one of the worst teams in college basketball. It's a good get-right game for them at home to where they can relax, they can recoup, they can rest, and hopefully get their rhythm back before Liberty, because Liberty's a solid team as well. But I was pleased. Arizona is probably going to be in the Final Four this year. They're
They're a good team.
Top 5 team. Yeah, one of my favorite teams to watch. Coach Lloyd has those guys playing hard. They got a good mix of veterans and young guys as well. So it's nothing to hang your hat on, or losing to them by 13 basically on their home floor, because that place was crazy. But overall, a lot of mistakes by Alabama that really kept them out of it at the end. But obviously things they can clean up, and I just got to start learning from it against teams that are probably at their level or below upcoming.
Yeah, I agree with, first of all, I like your take on Walters. I wrote about him. I think he's, of all the people who has, of their defined roles, like I think his is the most easily defined, and I think he fits it perfectly. And I think we've seen more of him, and he's in a better spot than, maybe some thought he would be coming into the year. Like there was obviously the physicality things, which Oates has been open about. And the reason he can't stay on the floor longer is because he's, not big enough to really guard some of the forwards at his height just yet. But I mean, he makes good plays, like, and he hits shots, and he doesn't try to do too much. So he was definitely a bright spot.
Yeah. He has a fun role, man. Just come in
and
fire it up.
You can, if you can get 8 to 12 points out of him on 3 shots, like, you're golden. That's going to help you win a game.
And most times when he shoots, it doesn't even hit rim. Like when
nylon.
he doesn't think about it, it goes in pretty much every time. And it shows the confidence that Nate Oates has in him, sending him to the free throw line for technical fouls or things like that. I mean, that's just confidence in an 18-year-old kid that's, doesn't play a whole lot. So, I mean, it just shows that Nate has confidence in his shot. There's obviously parts of his game that needs to get better, and that'll come with, maturity and age. But he's a fun player to watch, and I think his role is only going to get bigger as time goes on and the more scoring that Alabama needs.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, with the other stuff that you said, it's just little mistakes. It'll be a nice get right game to where you're not playing so tense. I mean, this team is, relatively inexperienced when it comes to facing a team like Arizona, and being in those atmospheres, like you said. I think you were spot on too with Sears. I thought it was an incredibly uncharacteristic game for him. I think Arizona, you have to give them a lot of credit, but it was just, I mean, even inside the 3-point line, like, it was incredibly inefficient. I mean, I think like Sears, if I remember off the top of my head, was like 2 for 9. Estrada was like 4 for 10. from the field. And, the lack of I talked with Oates about this after the Creighton game. I mean, for Sears especially, what I think makes him so special is obviously he can knock down a big three when you need it, but it's his ability to drive and get to the free throw line. And when he's walled off like that, it becomes really hard when then he's not making threes for him to be a positive, because he's not blowing by guys. He's not getting Alabama trips to the line. That was something they did well in the first half. And, you start to write about it, and then all of a sudden, they've shot 4 times from the free throw line, and there's 10 minutes left in the game. And that's a big issue. So yeah, it's little things you can clean up. And so with that, I'll segue. And so it's, what do you want to see? I'm assuming obviously Liberty's an all right team. We'll have to look more into them. But what do you want to see from these next 2 games that will, or maybe what should fans be looking for that could be the most reassuring, given the opponents? Obviously, you take whatever happens with a bit of a grain of salt with who they're playing. But what's the best kind of win for you in these next 2 games if you're Nate Oates going into conference play?
It's hard to say about Eastern Kentucky just because they're really bad. Obviously, you want to see the threes go down, but you don't want to see that they're just going to be forcing them to show that they can make them or see how many they can make. You want to get them back to playing downhill basketball, playing inside out, getting to the rim. If the rim's not there, kick it out to the corner to Grant, who's a really good corner 3-point shooter, or Sam, or whoever's out there. You want to see them start attacking more. I felt like one thing that Arizona did really well, and Coach Lloyd is a great scouter. They really funneled Alabama's guards to try to drive, and then you'll have Ballo step up and close it off and force the kick out to Grant. They were funneling everything to try to them to kick it to Grant, knowing he was going to shoot. And he shot 15 threes. So obviously it worked because he only hit 3 of them. So you want to be able to get to the rim, get to the foul line. This team, the past 2 years have been one of the best in the country at getting to the foul line. This year they're not getting to the foul line enough. Their scoring is down from the scoring in the paint. I feel like 3 of the past 4 games outside of Creighton, which they dominated the paint, they've been really 3 heavy. Purdue, they shot a bunch. Against Arizona, they shot a bunch. And obviously Arkansas State, they could do whatever they wanted against them. But I don't want to see them get more reliant on the 3 ball just to try to get back in rhythm. They're at their best when they drive and kick, and not pass around and then
jack one up,
take the next open one. Yeah, it's best in rhythm. So I want to see that, and I want to see more of how they adjust defensively, just because they did something that I've been waiting to see them do. So the past 2 years, they've had Charles Bediako in the middle, and they've run a lot of drop coverage because you wanted to funnel everybody to taking a mid-range or just dare them to challenge Charles at the rim because they weren't going to score on Bediako, who's a top 5 interior defender in the country. And it forced a lot of bad shots. Now, you can't really do that because they're going to score over Wagee or Pringle, or they're going to get them in foul trouble anyways because they're just not good interior defenders. They're not rim protectors. They're okay out in space. They're more mobile than Charles is. So they started hedging more, hard hedging up top on the high ball screens, really forcing the guards out and making them play farther away from the basket. And I thought that really set Arizona kind of off schedule early on. And that's kind of what, kind of rattled them a little bit. They weren't expecting that. And as the game went on, Arizona adjusted, but Alabama really didn't. They stayed to what they were, and they had a lot of mismatches inside, dump downs to Ballo or whoever was inside, and just had a big size advantage. But I want to see how that kind of progresses because I think that's the best route for the defense to take. Just because I think Wagee and Pringle are athletic. They can move. They could stay with them a little bit and get back to their spot. Charles was just too slow. No offense to him, but it's just he was a bigger dude. So I want to see how the defense progresses while they guard the ball screen like that. And I just want to see them get back to their MO and get to the free throw line and just getting to the rim more while taking some rhythm threes on kickouts.
Yeah. I think that's what I want to see, the return of the drive and kick. I think another dominant Mark Sears game. He solidifies that, maybe against Liberty, takes over and, heading into SEC play, you're thinking, oh, this guy could be a legit, first team all SEC guy and take over.
And I want to say one thing on Mark. While he didn't have a good offensive game and he seemed out of rhythm, he had 6 steals. Dude was after it on the defensive end. It doesn't matter.
Him and Estrada were both those little pickpockets they had and those little like strip takeaways when they were driving. They doubled down and I noticed that as well. Sorry, continue.
No, yes. Sears, they couldn't convert on those, and that's kind of where Arizona did and Alabama couldn't. There were times where, any stop is a great stop for Alabama because they just don't get them very often. But when you get fast break opportunities like that and you don't score, it's really deflating. But Mark Sears, you don't worry about his effort. I mean, he's a dog out there. If he's not hitting offensively, he's going to play his tail off defensively, and that's what he did against bigger guards, faster guards. So he just used good technique, and I think he used his wittiness to really take the ball away a lot from Arizona. So I mean, kudos to him.
Yeah, agreed. So the little things, getting back to what they know, driving and kicking, some defensive kind of adjustments we want to see made. Jordan, any final quick takeaways heading into EKU and Liberty? Hopefully you didn't jinx. I know we've had some strange upsets in the SEC with these mid majors, so you can't count anyone out. I mean, Mizzou lost to a 1-5 Jackson State team. Arkansas's lost to UNC Greensboro. UNC Wilmington beat Kentucky. Could go on and on.
Mississippi State lost to Southern. It's no, I don't think it's time to panic. Like going back to the beginning, I went through the SEC schedule today just to kind of see how it's shaping out now, and realistically, man, I think Alabama will start off about 8-2 in SEC play, and that's very realistic. That's I think they had Vandy starting out, so they get kind of an easy start out game. And then I think they play Mississippi State, Missouri, South Carolina. 2 of those are at home. So, I don't believe in any of those teams personally. South Carolina hasn't played anybody. Mississippi State hasn't played anybody. And then I think outside at the back end of the first 10, you got Tennessee and Auburn, which Auburn's at home. And then at Tennessee, but squeezed in there, you got LSU, Georgia. They got a very easy schedule, to be honest, in SEC play. They were very fortunate. It's very back heavy. I know they play a murderer's row of 3 straight ranked teams, 3 of the last 4 games, but I think 2 of them are at home. So they're going to have opportunities for a lot of wins in the SEC. I don't think it's time to throw them under the bus because they're 6-5 now. I think they'll still finish 18, 20 wins or more and be just fine. It's hard to gauge how good a team really is against the best of the best, but the fact that they stayed with them basically on the road at every single one of them tells me all I need to know. They're not going to play teams like that in the SEC. There's only going to be 1 or 2 that might be close to that level, and then the rest are going to be at or below the level of talent that they got. So, and we've seen that they can just dominate teams that are at that level. So I'm not worried, and I'm excited to see how they finish out non-con and roll into SEC play, because that's where it really gets fun.
They have a murderer's row of 3 ranked teams. They just did that. So that's what Nate Oates is all about.
Ain't no better, and they ain't no better than what they just faced. So
there you go.
They'll be a totally different team come into February, early March too. So
I think I agree with you. I think we're gonna be looking back at a different team than what we're seeing now. Jordan, thank you. That we'll end the show. We'll have you. Yeah, you'll pop back on. Maybe do a recap of the last 2 non-con games. Maybe some prediction time heading into SEC play. But for that, we will close out Tide Pod. We appreciate everyone watching. Enjoy the holiday weekend. We'll be back next week with another episode.